A routine morning at a busy United States border crossing. Long lines of vehicles stretching back across the asphalt, engines rumbling in steady rhythm, sunlight glinting off windshields, travelers waiting patiently, officers moving methodically through each inspection lane, calm, controlled, disciplined. And then, without warning, the ordinary cracked open. Everything changed. A single vehicle rolled forward through the primary inspection booth, slowly, deliberately, nothing about it drawing attention at first glance, its appearance clean, its motion smooth, its exterior unremarkable, the kind of vehicle that passes through hundreds of times each day without a second look. And yet, on this day, fate was different, shock quietly forming beneath the surface. In that instant, a subtle shift rippled through the inspection lane. Something small, something nearly invisible, a detail so fine that only eyes trained by years of experience would detect it. A slight hesitation in the driver's response, a momentary break in eye contact, a tension in the shoulders, an unnatural stillness in the hands gripping the steering wheel, an unease carried on silence. The mystery thickened, heavy and unmoving, a stillness hanging in the air like a held breath. And the officers watching knew, without speaking, that something was wrong. No alarm sounded, no voices were raised, no dramatic confrontation unfolded, just quiet observation, careful study, professional instinct sharpening like a blade. That silence, dense and echoing, marked the exact turning point. The moment when normal procedure shifted into heightened scrutiny, the moment suspicion was born, and the decision was made to look deeper. What began as a routine border check soon evolved into a discovery that would change everything. A discovery that revealed a staggering quantity of illegal narcotics concealed deep inside the vehicle's structure, later estimated at nearly $10 million worth of methamphetamine. A load engineered to bypass detection, built with precision, intended to slip through unnoticed. At first glance, the car appeared ordinary, nothing unusual about the make or model, the paint unchipped, the panels clean, documents submitted without delay, the driver composed, respectful, cooperative. But evidence does not always reveal itself immediately. Sometimes it waits beneath metal and silence. As officers continued the process, reviewing paperwork, asking routine questions, monitoring behavior, the answers given did not align cleanly with the details expected, details that should have aligned but did not. Inconsistencies, subtle yet unmistakable, and suspicion grew. Evidence emerged slowly, with patience, small hints accumulating, interior components appearing irregular upon visual examination, manufacturing lines out of symmetry, fasteners displaying faint but visible signs of recent tampering, sound resonance inconsistent with known factory specifications, subtle clues beginning to point towards something hidden. Suspicion deepened, steady and controlled, the kind that forms not from assumption or confrontation, but from experience, training, observation, and respect for procedure. And that rising suspicion transformed the inspection from routine to investigation. To understand the full weight of this moment, it is necessary to understand the environment in which border officers operate. Frontline defenders at ports of entry, where thousands of travelers move every day, each representing the unknown, each representing possibility, threat, or innocence. Officers tasked with the responsibility of preventing dangerous substances from entering the country. Substances tied to violence, addiction, loss, and profound harm. Publicly available Border Force, CBP, and Homeland Security Investigations documentary footage reveals the reality of such operations. Officers balancing immense pressure with precision, working under relentless time constraints, constantly evaluating, constantly scanning, constantly prepared for danger that may emerge from the most ordinary-looking circumstances. In these real cases, calm can transform into crisis in seconds. One unexpected detail can trigger an entire investigative sequence. A routine traffic stop becomes an operation. Silence becomes strategy. Stillness becomes vigilance. And so it happened here. The vehicle directed to secondary inspection, without drama, without force, without confrontation, only methodical process. Officers communicating through brief gestures and quiet coordination, moving with the practice rhythm seen in real documentary recordings of similar seizures released to the public. The vehicle sat motionless beneath bright inspection bay lights, its steel frame cool and silent. Officers circling slowly, analyzing details, preparing equipment, the atmosphere tight with growing tension. And beneath the metal, concealed deep within carefully engineered compartments, millions of dollars worth of methamphetamine waited to be discovered, intended for distribution, intended for profit, intended to fuel networks of devastation, but stopped before it could begin its journey. That discovery would ignite a chain of events stretching far beyond the inspection bay, leading to forensic analysis, advanced investigative procedures, collaboration across agencies, and ultimately, legal consequences determined through the court system. But it all began with this moment, this shift from routine to revelation. Before continuing further, before examining the unfolding investigation and the steps that transformed suspicion to certainty, a quiet request, spoken with respect. If you believe that real cases like this matter, if you value the documentation of true events and the dedication of those who protect national borders, consider subscribing, because preserving stories like this ensures that the work behind the scenes is not forgotten, and that the impact of drug trafficking is understood not in silence, but through truth. Now return to this scene in your mind, the inspection bay still, the vehicle motionless, officers watching from every angle, the driver sitting quietly, unmoving, the air heavy with anticipation. This was the point before the breakthrough, the last moment of calm before revelation, the thin line between suspicion and evidence. To understand what happened next, we go back to the beginning, to the vehicle, to the timeline, to the behavior that sparked concern, to the first red flags that turned a routine morning into a landmark investigation. Part 2 begins there, with the vehicle itself, the first questions asked, and the subtle clues that would lead to one of the largest seizures of its kind. Hours before the moment everything changed, the timeline of the day unfolded quietly, steadily, without urgency, without disruption, the border facility waking slowly with first light, the sky still pale gray as officers signed in, gathered briefing sheets, confirmed assignments, and prepared for a long day ahead. Routine, predictable, structured, the rhythm of daily duty beginning like countless mornings before it. Inside the operations building, monitors flickered to life, rows of screens illuminating the dim room with real-time footage from lanes outside, status logs updating with each passing vehicle, systems syncing to national databases, communication channels tested, identification scanners calibrated, officers reviewing directives and priority alerts distributed in the morning briefing, their focus calm and practiced, shaped by years of discipline and training. Outside the facility, the world moved slowly at first, the early morning air cool and still, the recognizable rumble of engines gradually building in the distance as vehicles formed a line stretching outward from the port of entry. Personal cars, commercial vans, aging trucks, polished sedans, the familiar mixture seen on every border day, carrying families, students, business travelers, commuters, and cargo drivers, all inching forward at the controlled pace of the line. Sunlight broke across the pavement, shadows shifting beneath tires and fenders, the steady hum of conversation from open windows blending into the deep vibrating tone of idling engines, everything seemingly ordinary, everything predictably normal. The vehicle at the center of this case entered that line without fanfare, without a sound that distinguished it from the vehicles around it, captured by automated lane cameras, time-stamped by registration logging systems, stored in routine entry data with no alert indicators attached, no watch flags, no system interruptions, nothing to suggest its importance or danger, just another entry in the stream of daily records. As the line moved forward, the vehicle progressed slowly, rolling forward several feet at a time, stopping, inching forward again, the repetitive rhythm of border traffic. The driver remaining steady behind the wheel, windows up, eyes forward, posture still, hands motionless, everything appearing controlled, composed, completely ordinary on the surface. And yet, as seen time and time again in public border force footage and CBP-released documentary case reviews, major seizures rarely appear dramatic at first glance. They do not announce themselves with visible warnings or obvious signals. Instead, they emerge through silence, through details too small to notice without experience, through behavior patterns that speak louder than words ever can. As the vehicle neared the primary inspection booth, officers monitored the approaching line, scanning each driver briefly, reviewing expressions, posture, hand movements, responses to waiting, micro-reactions embedded within routine. And as the vehicle drew close, one officer observed something difficult to define at first, something small, something subtle, but unmistakable, a shift in the driver's behavior the moment proximity closed. Behavior can change in an instant, and in environments like these, behavior is often the first signal that something beneath the surface is concealed. The driver's breathing changed, shallow, controlled, forced rather than natural, the chest rising and falling in rigid rhythm, the hands tightening around the steering wheel until knuckles paled, the eyes no longer moving casually but fixed intensely on a single point, avoiding contact, refusing interaction. And when asked to move forward into the inspection space, the motion of the vehicle came late, hesitant, delayed by a fraction that spoke volumes to trained perception. The officer took note, quietly, internally, without expression, without reaction, the moment cataloged and mentally highlighted, forming the foundation of concern. The conversation began simply, a calm greeting, a request for travel documents, the beginning of a normal interaction repeated thousands of times each week, and yet the tone of the response fell flat, lacking ease, lacking flow. The words formed only after visible effort, sentences short, clipped, uncertain, a tension that could not be ignored. Behavior often reveals more than speech, and in this interaction, behavior fractured the illusion of normalcy, building quiet pressure beneath the surface, like water rising unseen behind a dam. And so came the first pivotal decision, delivered silently, signaled through posture, through the smallest gesture recognized by fellow officers across the inspection zone. The call to escalate, the call to direct the vehicle towards secondary inspection, the moment that separated this vehicle from the rest. A brief motion of the arm, a hand directing left, a quiet statement spoken softly enough not to draw public attention, and the vehicle was rerouted. Inside the secondary screening zone, the environment changed dramatically, the atmosphere isolating, contained, controlled, surveillance cameras capturing every angle, bright lights revealing every detail, and the weight of silence thickening the air. The driver followed instruction, pulling slowly into position, engine switching off, the surroundings growing still, the doors closed, windows up, no motion, no gesture, only waiting. Waiting beneath the intensity of trained eyes. Officers arrived in coordinated sequence, not rushing, not reacting emotionally, but moving with practiced timing, each stepping into place with precision, each maintaining the professionalism demanded in high-pressure environments, and the process began without confrontation, without accusation, only procedure, routine, structure. One officer approached the window, another noted positioning details, a third began preliminary visual review of the vehicle's exterior, while others observed the driver carefully, studying facial tension, breathing pattern, hand movement, and eye movement, building a profile through observation alone, collecting data without words. Questions began again, slower now, more detailed, designed not to challenge but to measure consistency. Questions about destination, timing, purpose, connection to location, relationship to vehicle ownership, length of travel, and expectations after crossing the border. All standard, all routine. The answers that followed did not match the clarity expected. Details stumbling, small contradictions appearing within seconds, the narrative shifting slightly with each retelling, the tone uneven, strained, forced, the silences between words growing longer and heavier. In secondary inspection, silence is its own language, and here, silence spoke loudly. The officers exchanged brief glances, subtle but decisive, communicating without sound that concerns were mounting, that inconsistencies were forming patterns, and that the narrative did not align, and that procedural steps needed to deepen. Clues gathered quietly, accumulating through details rather than confrontation. Clues found in the pauses, the hesitations, the small misalignments, the inability to maintain eye contact, the unnatural stillness of hands, the tightening jaw, the visible swallow between responses. Clues that experienced officers learned to recognize through countless encounters documented in educational training segments and media-permitted case archival footage. These early clues did not yet prove anything, but they shifted the path of the inspection. They transformed possibility into likelihood, and they pointed toward the need for advanced review, for deeper examination of the vehicle itself. The decision approached slowly, deliberately, built on layers of observation, built on procedural integrity, built on the need for certainty, and then it was made. The decision to transition fully into physical inspection, the moment that marked the beginning of uncovering the truth. Everything ahead would change rapidly, inspection moving from external to internal, from observation to analysis, from behavior review to forensic verification. Part 3 begins at the moment that process started, the moment the tools were prepared, the moment the canine unit stepped into place, the moment irregularities in the vehicle's structure began to surface, the moment the first true breakthrough emerged.
The transition from secondary questioning to physical inspection unfolded with deliberate calm, measured steps, controlled breathing, motions practiced and precise, the atmosphere shifting slowly into a deeper level of focus, the weight of responsibility settling silently over the inspection bay. And the officers understood that every second from this point forward mattered. Forensic inspection procedures began, not rushed, not hurried, but steady, methodical, designed to collect information layer by layer, built on accuracy, built on patience, built on the principle that truth reveals itself only through discipline and order. The first phase involved visual forensics, officers circling the vehicle slowly, scanning exterior panels, analyzing alignment lines, where factory structure should meet with mechanical precision, looking for irregularities that suggest hidden internal modifications, hands gliding lightly across surfaces, listening to resonance, feeling for imperfections, noting the smallest deviations. Analysis followed quickly behind observation. Officers recording visual impressions, documenting measurements, comparing structural language of the vehicle against known manufacturing patterns, identifying areas where symmetry did not fully align, where density did not match expected standards, where weight distribution hinted at something concealed beneath the surface. Nothing conclusive yet, nothing definitive, but enough to continue, enough to justify deeper review. The inspection environment grew quiet, every sound amplified in the stillness. Footsteps soft against the concrete floor, gloved fingers tapping lightly against metal, echoes revealing subtle inconsistencies in tone, the auditory signature different at certain points of the frame. And the silence itself felt heavier than before. Then came the first alert, not dramatic, not loud, simply a shift in attention. An officer pausing after a hollow resonance that did not fit the rest of the vehicle, a quiet signal to others nearby. Heads turning, listening, comparing sound patterns again, calculating probability. Patterns began to emerge, patterns familiar from documented interdiction cases released in training footage and public educational sequences, patterns that suggest structural alteration, patterns that typically indicate engineered concealment spaces, not visible externally, but built deep within interior sections of the vehicle. The K9 unit was called forward, a step used frequently across major border ports, documented in public border force and CBP demonstration videos. A highly trained detection dog guided carefully around the perimeter of the vehicle. Movements precise, systematic, sweeping along seams, corners, door frames, lower chassis points, rear panels, and floor structure. The dog moved steadily, nose working in rhythmic motion, analyzing scent signatures airborne and embedded, trained to identify chemical traces invisible to human senses. And as the sweep progressed, tension built with each passing second. Then, abruptly, the motion changed. The dog stopping sharply, posture stiffening, nose pressing against a specific section of the vehicle's interior structure, breath quickening, muscles rigid, a clear behavioral alert, a signal well known to handlers, a signal that indicates possible presence of controlled substances or concealed materials of significance. Officers acknowledged silently. No celebration, no visible reaction, only the tightening of focus, an internal shift from suspicion to heightened probability. Simultaneously, surveillance analysis began. Officers accessing review stations to examine recorded footage of the vehicle's approach, analyzing license plate data, cross-referencing entry checkpoints, reviewing movement patterns in holding lanes, mapping time intervals between stops and progressions, looking for irregular pacing, hesitation, spacing anomalies consistent with drivers attempting to manage stress or recalibrate decisions during waiting periods. The surveillance review supported the rising concern. The vehicle showing minor but notable stop-and-start pacing abnormalities in earlier footage, behavior consistent with internal conflict, hesitation, or high-pressure decision-making. Not definitive proof, but strengthening the developing narrative. Now, the moment of breakthrough approached. Slowly, carefully. Not with force, but with strategy. Officers preparing to examine interior structural components more closely, beginning with panels not typically accessed during ordinary travel, areas where concealment methods are commonly observed in documented interdiction cases. With measured precision, inspection tools traced edges of interior linings, noting tension points where material resisted normal flexing, unnatural rigidity indicating layered construction, engineered reinforcement, and potential hidden cavities. One panel revealed an unusual thickness upon evaluation, heavier than expected, the interior contour not matching manufacturer's specifications, the composition uneven across its surface, and subtle vibration patterns confirming internal density foreign to standard structure. Attention concentrated intensely on that area, everything narrowing to a single point of focus, and slowly, cautiously, the inspection continued deeper, layer by layer, material showing signs of recent modification, adhesive consistency inconsistent with original factory bond, edges reinforced using methods detectable through forensic analysis tools, but invisible to casual observation. And then, the pivotal discovery emerged. The first concealed compartment became visible. A space not part of original design, engineered into the interior frame, reinforced and sealed, created to house something significant. The kind of hidden structure that appears in major narcotic smuggling cases, shown publicly in CBP and HSI documentary episodes, distributed for public awareness and training. The compartment was accessed slowly, carefully, respecting safety protocol, respecting chain of custody, respecting legal necessity for precise handling of evidence. And within the darkness of the space lay tightly compressed packages, uniform in shape, wrapped in multiple layers designed to resist detection, material consistent with high-value narcotics transport. The officers did not celebrate. They did not react emotionally. They simply paused, silently acknowledging the gravity of the discovery, knowing that what lay inside was not small, not accidental, not incidental, but deliberate, calculated, part of something significantly larger than a single transport. The material was tested using field analysis procedures authorized for initial identification, the chemical response confirming suspected presence of methamphetamine, a substance linked publicly by law enforcement reports to organized criminal trafficking networks, addiction, overdoses, and community devastation. The weight of the moment pressed heavily through the inspection bay, the realization forming slowly that the quantity discovered already appeared substantial, and instinct indicated that the compartment likely was not the only one, that more concealed spaces awaited discovery, that this vehicle represented not a minor smuggling attempt, but part of a larger operation. The discovery created immediate direction for investigators, the first lead forming, the beginning point from which broader questions would emerge, questions about logistics, distribution, origin, ownership, and intended destination, questions that would soon lead beyond the inspection bay and into a multi-layered investigation. The chain of events now accelerated, and everything that followed would deepen dramatically in complexity. Part 4 begins where this moment ends, with the expansion of investigation beyond the vehicle, with interviews, verification efforts, archival research, cross-agency communication, and rising tension between conflicting statements and emerging evidence.
The discovery of concealed compartments changed everything instantly, shifting the focus of the operation far beyond the vehicle itself, transforming what began as a routine inspection into a multi-layered criminal investigation. And from that moment forward, every action taken became part of a much larger pursuit, a pursuit aimed at uncovering the full scope of the trafficking attempt and identifying the network responsible for transporting such an immense quantity of illegal narcotics. Pursuit does not always begin with dramatic chase or visible urgency. Sometimes it begins with silence, with steady breathing, with controlled motion, as officers transition from inspection procedures into investigative strategy, knowing that the decisions made in minutes can shape weeks, months, or years of legal process ahead. The vehicle was secured, evidence sealed according to strict chain of custody protocol, and the driver was separated from the scene, escorted calmly into an interview room designed not for confrontation, but for clarity, for structure, a space where information could be gathered with precision and neutrality. Interviews began in measured tones, officers documenting responses carefully, every statement recorded, every reaction observed, the process unfolding slowly as questions expanded beyond immediate travel details and moved into background context, personal history, connections, travel patterns, and recent movements across borders or states. The driver's body language remained tense, posture rigid, hands clasped tightly. The silence between responses more pronounced than the words spoken, pauses stretching longer and longer as each question demanded clarity that did not come easily. And so began the gathering of testimony. Not testimony in a courtroom, but testimony in the form of answers. Answers that needed to align. Answers that required consistency. Initially, the testimony presented a simple narrative. A short trip, a personal errand, a borrowed vehicle. But as questions became more complex, gaps widened, details contradicted earlier statements, destinations shifted, timelines compressed and expanded, and justification unraveled under scrutiny. Officers requested access to records connected to the vehicle, records that would reveal ownership details, repair documentation, travel history, and any recent modifications noted in service logs, records that often speak louder than verbal responses. The first set of records revealed irregularities, vehicle registration recently transferred, insurance updated only days before crossing, inspection paperwork completed in a different region from where the vehicle was reportedly stored, each document raising more questions rather than providing answers. Archive retrieval followed, digital systems accessed to examine historical entries, border crossing logs analyzed, transportation databases reviewed for prior travel events, and within those archives appeared a pattern. The vehicle had crossed the border multiple times in recent months, even though the driver claimed this was the first crossing. Verification procedures began immediately.
Officials calling locations listed in the testimony, contacting businesses named in travel explanations, reviewing toll road data and highway camera transit timestamps, and with each verification attempt, inconsistencies multiplied. Revelation struck not as a sudden moment, but as a gradual unmasking, layers of truth peeling away from a story that no longer held weight. And it became evident that the driver's statements could not be reconciled with documented records. The investigation expanded outward. Additional interviews conducted with individuals connected to the vehicle's registration history, testimony collected from prior points of contact, statements gathered from repair shops associated with previously filed mechanical work orders, all forming a picture more complex than originally understood. But with every revelation came doubt. Doubt about the origin of the vehicle. Doubt about whether the driver was acting independently or under direction. Doubt about the level of knowledge possessed regarding the concealed narcotics. Doubt about whether the individual in custody was a courier, a participant, or a manipulated third party. Doubt amplified by the absence of clear answers. Publicly available case analysis from similar major seizures describes this stage as one filled with conflict. Conflict between narrative and evidence. Conflict between cooperative posture and concealed truth. Conflict between appearance and reality. Conflict between silence and accountability. Multiple investigative branches now became engaged. Homeland Security investigations reviewing digital communication records, officers examining cellular data patterns, analysis teams focusing on travel routes, financial review units studying recent transactions for signs of unexplained funds or irregular payments, and cooperation requests issued across jurisdictions. Tension climbed steadily, the weight of the case pressing inward from all directions. Law enforcement personnel balancing the need for urgency with the requirement for accuracy, knowing that every piece of evidence gathered must withstand legal scrutiny, knowing that mistakes could compromise months of effort, knowing that the true scope of the crime could stretch far beyond what was visible inside the inspection bay. The tension extended into every room involved in the investigation, the sterile interview room silent except for the sound of pen strokes on paper, the pressure of unanswered questions filling the space like thick air. The officers maintained calm expression, the driver visibly struggling beneath the strain of mounting evidence. Nothing dramatic was spoken aloud. No confession, no admission, only silence. And silence in investigations like this often speaks the loudest. The case now moved into its next critical stage, a stage involving broader exposure, the uncovering of deeper operational elements behind the trafficking attempt, and the pursuit of individuals beyond the driver whose decisions shaped the journey of the vehicle long before it reached the border. Part 5 begins with rising pressure, with theories forming and collapsing, with mistaken leads and red herrings complicating the path forward, and with manipulation and strategy emerging within the investigative field, and with the slow but relentless exposure of a larger criminal structure.
Pressure began pressing inward from all sides, slowly at first, then relentlessly, wrapping itself around every stage of the investigation, building as evidence accumulated and unanswered questions multiplied. The weight of responsibility heavy on the shoulders of officers and investigators working the case, the significance of the discovery becoming clearer with each passing hour, and everyone involved understood that failures in cases of this scale carry consequences far beyond a single arrest. The pressure was not loud or chaotic, it was quiet, internal, a tightening in the chest, a sharpening of focus, the awareness that one mistake could jeopardize months of investigative potential, the awareness that somewhere beyond the border facility existed a larger operation waiting for confirmation that its shipment had not arrived, and the knowledge that time was now a critical factor. As pressure intensified, focus sharpened into something deeper, something closer to obsession, an obsessive commitment to uncovering the truth buried beneath the surface of the confiscated vehicle, an obsessive search for connection, movement, purpose, meaning.
an obsessive need to understand how a transport of such enormous value could move across national lines without drawing alert before reaching inspection. Investigators documented every detail, reviewing every scrap of testimony, every line of digital records, every anomaly in travel logs, building theories piece by piece, assembling possibilities like fragments of a map waiting to align, building out potential pathways of supply, routes of transport and distribution structures, theories evolving quickly into branching investigative models. The first theory proposed centered on independent transport, the possibility that the driver was a lone operator moving narcotics across borders for personal gain. But the scale of the drug load made that unlikely. $10 million worth of methamphetamine was far beyond the scope of individual trafficking. Another theory surfaced, the possibility that the driver was a hired courier, an expendable link used by larger organizations to distance themselves from risk, a tactic frequently referenced in public law enforcement presentations describing cartel transportation strategies, a method designed to isolate responsibility and conceal leadership. Then a third theory emerged, the possibility of vehicle swapping, where drivers are instructed to transport cars given to them by unknown intermediaries, unaware of concealed narcotics, believing they are delivering a clean vehicle in exchange for small compensation or favor. A tactic documented in public case summaries used to shield organizations by assigning transport to individuals with minimal criminal history. Each theory carried weight, each theory held possibility, each theory demanded investigation. But with theories came uncertainty, and uncertainty often leads to red herrings. Information surfaced that seemed promising, then dissolved into unrelated events, digital clues that appeared significant but led nowhere, financial activity that suggested connection then proved explainable through unrelated transactions, individuals linked to registration history who, upon verification, held no connection to organized crime, each false lead consuming time and resources, each red herring deepening frustration. But in the midst of false trails, a twist emerged, quietly, unexpectedly, through forensic examination of vehicle components submitted for laboratory evaluation. Analysis confirming that interior modifications were performed professionally using industrial-grade tools, using structural reinforcement techniques far beyond the skill set of amateur mechanics, suggesting involvement of an organized, well-resourced operation. This twist shifted investigative direction sharply, from questioning individual responsibility to uncovering structural command, from one person to many, from the visible surface to the hidden architecture beneath. Investigators now focused heavily on organization, mapping known trafficking structures associated with similar concealment methods, cross-referencing forensic signatures with historical seizures documented in public case archives, discovering parallels in engineering technique that connected this concealment style to a cluster of major smuggling cases intercepted across multiple border entries in recent years. This alignment did not confirm responsibility, but it indicated pattern, and pattern suggested network. Review expanded into suspected organizational manipulation, examining whether the driver's role was voluntary or coerced, reviewing digital communication records for signs of pressure, searching for instructions hidden through encrypted messaging or coded contact, seeking signs of psychological manipulation, reviewing public discussion of similar cases in which individuals later stated they were threatened into participation under fear of harm. Bit by bit, exposure increased. Not public exposure, but exposure within the investigative walls. Exposure of pathways, exposure of structure, exposure of motive, exposure that began to reveal the outlines of a larger criminal architecture operating beyond what could be seen inside an inspection bay. And threaded beneath the layers of exposure lay the shadow of corruption. Not accusations, not assumptions, but awareness. Awareness that large-scale drug trafficking rarely functions without internal compromise somewhere along its route. Awareness documented in public policy debates and case reviews discussing historical examples where corruption influenced border operations, shipping processes, or transportation channels. Awareness that investigators must consider without bias, without jumping to conclusions, without making claims not supported by evidence. Awareness treated as possibility, not fact. Inside the investigation room, tension climbed steadily, the air heavy with uncertainty. Officers reviewing timelines, legal teams preparing documentation, forensic analysts printing preliminary reports. Everyone aware that the case was changing shape rapidly, expanding from a single seizure into something broader, something heavier, something that demanded more resources, more analysis, more time. Tension lived in unanswered questions, in records still being processed, in the silence of the driver who spoke little and revealed nothing, in the awareness that larger forces may be watching from the outside, waiting to determine whether the shipment was lost or delayed, waiting to decide their next move. No raised voices, no dramatic confrontation, only stillness, stillness holding the weight of consequences. Part 6 begins where law enforcement preparation meets legal action, where charges form, where courts enter the process, where outcomes move from investigation to judgment, and where public reaction spreads beyond the walls of the border facility.
The transition from investigation to legal action marked a significant shift in the trajectory of the case, the system now stepping forward with full structure and authority, the legal framework activating around the evidence collected, procedural safeguards ensuring every step aligned with constitutional and judicial standards, the system working slowly, deliberately, carefully, knowing that the consequences of error in cases of this magnitude extend far beyond the courtroom. Federal authorities prepared documentation outlining charges connected to the seizure, legal teams reviewing evidence to determine the appropriate criminal statutes applicable under federal law, the chain of custody meticulously verified, forensic reports cross-checked, timelines reconstructed with precision, ensuring no break in procedural integrity existed, because the system demands accuracy, requires precision, and tolerates no shortcuts. Within that system, mistakes are always studied, analyzed, and sometimes feared. Mistakes that could compromise legal viability, mistakes that could raise questions during trial, mistakes that could allow defense strategies to dismantle prosecutions. And investigative teams reviewed every step repeatedly, ensuring no procedural misstep could undermine months of work, ensuring no detail was overlooked, ensuring that truth was supported by documented fact. Policy played a significant role now. Federal policy guiding the legal handling of narcotics trafficking, policy shaping sentencing structure, policy defining investigative boundaries and evidentiary standards, policy influenced by years of legislative debate and public discourse, policy designed to protect both national security and constitutional rights. As charges were formally announced, the news generated a shockwave, not explosive or chaotic, but powerful, rippling outward from the border facility through official channels, media releases summarizing the seizure, the scale of the narcotics intercepted, and the value estimated by law enforcement authorities according to market calculations used in public case reporting. A shockwave spreading through agencies, through communities, through the digital world. Digital platforms amplified the story quickly. News outlets publishing headlines, law enforcement pages releasing statements, public awareness campaigns referencing the seizure as an example of the ongoing national struggle against drug trafficking. Images of seized material published in blurred and controlled format. The story gaining traction across online spaces where public conversation intensifies rapidly. Social media responded immediately, voices rising in comment threads, questions forming, speculation emerging, debate expanding, individuals expressing fear, frustration, anger, disbelief, and relief all at once. Digital reactions reflecting the complexity of a society impacted deeply by narcotics trafficking and the harm it inflicts. Community response grew louder, local leaders acknowledging the significance of the seizure, nonprofit organizations addressing the ongoing damage inflicted by methamphetamine addiction, families affected by substance abuse sharing painful stories in public comment forums, community advocates speaking about recovery resources, the human impact of narcotics trafficking becoming visible beyond the evidence bags and courtroom filings. Reaction increased, people discussing the scale of the seizure, the reality that so much dangerous substance had nearly crossed into circulation, the weight of what could have happened if the vehicle had passed undetected, an emotional response mixed with shock and gratitude toward the officers whose vigilance prevented a far-reaching tragedy. The story went viral, spread beyond regional boundaries to national distribution, shared widely across platforms where news is consumed in seconds. Viewers reacting to the magnitude, viewers reflecting on how close communities came to absorbing millions of doses of a substance tied to irreversible damage. Viral reach turning law enforcement work into public awareness. Insight surfaced through media interviews. Experts speaking in media interviews. Analysts explaining the connection between large-scale narcotics trafficking and organized criminal frameworks. Addiction specialists describing the cycle of dependency and recovery. Economists discussing the financial infrastructure behind illicit drug markets. Policy advocates debating changes needed to address root causes. A variety of perspectives emerging to contextualize the case beyond headlines. Profiles of those involved began circulating in public discussion, but always with caution. Identity information protected until legally confirmed through court filings and public record releases. Backgrounds examined through legal documentation rather than speculation. Investigators studying personal history to determine possible motivations, looking for patterns, searching for connections. Backgrounds revealed complexity, lives affected by economic pressure, communities struggling against cartel influence, individuals caught in circumstances shaped by desperation or coercion. The human side of criminal cases emerging slowly, reminding the public that behind legal statements are real lives shaped by forces far larger than themselves. Trauma surfaced into view. Not trauma within the investigation, but trauma within communities where methamphetamine leaves scars. Families broken, children displaced, relationships destroyed, lives lost to overdose, dreams dismantled through addiction. Trauma that gives meaning to the work of interdiction. Public conversation turned toward threat. The threat posed by organized trafficking networks. The threat felt by cities and small towns across the country. The threat tied to violence surrounding distribution markets. The threat of corruption, exploitation, and destruction that rides quietly within concealed compartments. Threats that cannot be ignored. Motives were analyzed. The motives of traffickers, the motives of couriers, the motives of organizers who view human lives as expendable assets, motivations built on profit, manipulation, and control, motivations dissected not through speculation, but through documented examples released in previous high-profile cases. The investigative trail continued forward, digital forensics expanding into communication history, financial tracking following currency movement across accounts, geolocation analysis mapping travel paths, trail building that slowly connected events across place and time, trail building that illuminated a broader network beyond a single vehicle. Discovery emerged slowly, new evidence forming through persistent analysis, connections solidifying, a clearer picture forming of how the vehicle entered the chain of transport. The discovery, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady, the result of countless hours of work. Then came a reversal. Not a reversal of guilt or innocence, but a reversal in investigative direction. A new lead revealing unexpected information, a development shifting focus from one assumed pathway to another previously overlooked. A moment that forced investigative teams to reevaluate assumptions and rebuild strategic direction. Intensity rose sharply, officers working longer hours, analysts cross-checking data through the night, attorneys preparing the framework for prosecution, stakeholders balancing public pressure with the need for silent precision.
Drama unfolded not an emotional spectacle, but in quiet rooms filled with documents, screens, and silent concentration. Drama existing in the stakes, in the magnitude of what lay beneath the surface, in the battle between concealment and truth. Then came the break, the investigative breakthrough that illuminated a critical connection, a breakthrough that tied evidence to documented patterns recognized in previous cases, a breakthrough that strengthened the legal foundation, a breakthrough that transformed complexity into clarity. Resolute followed slowly, resolute in the form of decisions made, resolute in the filing of formal charges, resolute in the commitment to pursue justice through the legal system, resolute in the understanding that the case now moved from investigation to courtroom. Part 7 begins now, with justice, with verdict, with impact, with the echo of what this case represents in the ongoing challenge of border security and narcotics prevention.
Justice moves slowly, and in cases of this scale, justice arrives not with celebration, but with solemn weight. The weight of decisions that determine futures, the weight of consequences shaped inside quiet, echoing courtroom walls. When the case reached court, months had passed since the vehicle rolled to a stop inside the border inspection bay. Months filled with reports, hearings, continuances, preparation meetings, witness scheduling, forensic documentation, the steady movement of the judicial system assembling itself around the evidence gathered, every detail examined, every step scrutinized, every motion filed with precision. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt heavy, the kind of stillness that comes when truth and outcome converge, the quiet breathing of those waiting to hear decisions that cannot be reversed, the eyes of attorneys scanning pages of notes, federal prosecutors prepared to present the full scope of evidence, defense counsel prepared to challenge every procedural step, and the judge presiding with expression neutral and unwavering, bound only to the law. Strategy unfolded in silence, arguments presented without theatrics, evidence introduced through controlled explanation, forensic testimony describing the discovery of concealed compartments, laboratory experts explaining the analysis confirming methamphetamine content and weight, investigators outlining the procedures followed from initial suspicion to seizure, all presented not to sensationalize, but to document truth. The prosecution built its case steadily, piece by piece, fact by fact, maintaining that the quantity of narcotics seized indicated large-scale trafficking activity, outlining the implications for public safety, emphasizing the responsibility of the legal system to respond with firmness. Defense strategy focused on doubt, questioning the level of knowledge possessed by the defendant, raising possibilities of coercion, arguing that the accused may have been manipulated into transporting the vehicle, claiming limited awareness of concealed narcotics, attempting to separate physical evidence from intent. Crossfire emerged, not in raised voices, but in point and counterpoint. Moments where tension filled the courtroom like dense smoke, one side asserting control and structure, the other pressing uncertainty and ambiguity, each word carrying weight as jurors watched in silence, assessing credibility with careful attention. Then the verdict approached, deliberation beginning behind closed doors, hours passing slowly, documents reviewed, evidence reconsidered, the gravity of the decision shaping the silence that spread through the hallway outside the chamber. Finally, the jury returned, the courtroom filled with stillness. The verdict delivered in steady tone. The defendant found guilty on federal drug trafficking charges, guilty of participating in the movement of narcotics intended for distribution, guilty under the law as determined through evidence and testimony. There was no applause, no triumphant outcry, no visible emotional collapse, only the quiet acknowledgement that the legal process had spoken, that justice, through due process, had reached its conclusion. Fallout followed swiftly. Sentencing determined according to federal guidelines for high-quantity methamphetamine distribution.
a lengthy prison term assigned, financial penalties imposed, future supervised conditions established, a life redirected by consequences that will extend over decades. Aftermath spread like shockwaves, pushing into communities beyond the courtroom. Families impacted by addiction reflecting on the tragedy that drugs bring. Recovery advocates emphasizing the importance of early intervention. Law enforcement leaders recognizing the importance of vigilance. Policy officials discussing how border security strategy continues to evolve in response to sophisticated trafficking tactics. Closure came slowly, not with relief, but with sober recognition. Recognition of what was prevented, recognition of what might have happened if suspicion had gone unnoticed, recognition of the many lives that could have been devastated by the distribution of millions of doses of a destructive drug. Reflection settled in. Reflection on the work of the officers who noticed what others may have missed. Reflection on the systems that exist to intercept crime before it reaches society. Reflection on the weight of decisions made in seconds that change entire outcomes. Impact became clear. Impact measured not in courtroom documents or media headlines, but in the invisible lives protected, the countless individuals who will never know how close danger came, the community spared from trauma that cannot be undone once unleashed. Memory of this case will remain, not as spectacle, not as entertainment, but as a testament to vigilance, a reminder of what border agents face every day. A reminder of the unseen battles fought quietly behind steel doors and fluorescent lights. And still, something haunting lingers. The knowledge that for every seizure made public, others attempt to cross. The haunting understanding that trafficking adapts, reorganizes, reconstructs. The haunting reality that the fight continues without end. Yet resolution exists in determination. Resolve within the agencies who confront trafficking daily. Resolve within those who lost loved ones to addiction and advocate for solutions. Resolve within communities determined to rebuild. Resolution fueled by duty, by responsibility, by purpose. A message remains. A message about vigilance. A message about awareness. A message about the cost of complacency. A message reminding us that the border is not merely a line, but a barrier protecting millions of people from forces intent on destruction. Awareness matters. Understanding matters. Truth matters. And in the final moments of this story, as the echo of the courtroom fades, as the lights dim in the inspection bay where this began, as silence returns to the border crossing where routine resumed the next morning, the weight of what happened remains. Finality does not erase effort. Finality does not erase danger. Finality only marks the end of one chapter and the beginning of the next challenge waiting just beyond the horizon. So let the echoes carry forward. The echo of vigilance, the echo of justice, the echo of lives unknowingly protected, the echo of officers whose quiet actions prevented unimaginable harm, the echo of truth, the echo of memory. And as this documentary draws to its end, a gentle request. Share this story so it is not forgotten. Share this story so awareness continues. Share this story so the sacrifices behind the scenes are seen and honored. Because when stories like this fade, the danger grows in silence, and silence is where destruction begins.